Hello everyone and welcome to a new MinotaurZombie review slash thoughts, this time on the psychological first-person shooter F.E.A.R, a game released back in 2005 by Monolith Studios and would later be ported to the Xbox 360 and PS3 in 2006 and 2007 respectively, I believe. This will be kind of a review slash thoughts of the PC version, which I purchased from GOG, and I think it's also available on Steam. This will also be kind of a review of the base game and then the two expansions that were made after, Extraction Point and Perseus Mandate. Now this is a series of games I had never played until just now. It's always stood out in my mind as having like this reputation. Like when I was growing up, I would be watching G4 and I'd see footage of this game and my mind would just be being blown at how cool it looked between the weapons, the physics, and like all the lighting effects going on. I think you kind of needed a really good computer to run this game back in the day. Back when this game came out, it was really critically acclaimed, and I wanted to go back and see if it still held up today. So starting off the story, you play as Point Man, a nameless guy working in the F.E.A.R squad, which is like a special tactical forces team that stands for First Encounter Assault Recon, and you're sent in. First day on the job, sent in to go take down this insane lunatic named Paxton Fettel, who's already taken down an entire squad. Oh, and he just happens to be a super psychic with an entire super soldier cloned army that takes orders from psychics. Kind of a bad combination. It's up to Point Man, along with his crew of two supporting characters that were kind of bland and I don't even really remember the names of.
Fucker's got an appetite.
I think he has an agenda. It's not just recreational. He's getting something out of it.
Essential vitamins and nutrients?
To take down Fettel, but standing in your way is a little girl in red dress giving you paranormal hallucinations, and absolutely crazy stuff goes down. The story itself isn't extremely deep by the end of the game, but it does put up a really good illusion of letting you think, form your own thoughts about what's going on, and they give you just enough information through like answering machine phone calls in these office environments or laptop computers to let you form an idea of what you think might be going down. Then later on, they'll tell you, and it kind of brings a satisfying conclusion. So it kind of keeps this atmosphere together. I overall enjoyed the story. I didn't really care much for the supporting cast of characters. They don't interfere too much, and overall, it doesn't interfere with what the game's trying to do, and that's to be a very atmospheric shooter. And I think that's important because when I went into this, I was expecting this to be a little bit more of a horror game, and I would not classify it like that. I've heard some people call this game really scary, and I wouldn't say that. I think it's more, it provides a really good atmosphere. It doesn't do things like jump scares, and instead opts for like more of a psychological horror, which honestly is the kind that I prefer. It does a lot of like hallucinations of the little girl in the red dress playing tricks with your mind, and all of a sudden you'll be running through a room, but the door ahead of you will shut, and then you spin around and where you just came from is gone, and then you spin around again, and then it'll be like a room covered in blood. It just messes with you, and some of these scenes are done really well. Big kudos to the developers for pulling a lot of that stuff off. At the end of the day, this game is a first-person shooter, and it ain't nothing if it don't shoot well. And you know what? This is a very competent, I would say above average shooter. You have a pretty good diverse cast of weapons, and nothing really feels throwaway. It uses the mechanic of only being able to hold 3 weapons at a time, which is actually more than a lot of modern games during the time would let you have. There's enough regular weapons like submachine guns, an assault rifle, but then you get a little bit crazier things like particle beam accelerator. No weapon feels throwaway. There always feels like every weapon has a purpose. It's never, I pick up the power weapon and I use only this power weapon. They'll kind of edge you towards playing around with more guns more often because they'll stop giving you ammo for certain ones, so then you gotta pick up something else. And it keeps it interesting the whole way throughout. And they'll usually give you, pretty close in plain sight, the weapon that would fit the situation coming ahead. So you never feel like, oh, I didn't pick up, the ASP rifle, which is kind of like the sniper. I didn't pick that up, and now the situation's really hard. They usually make sure you have access to that kind of stuff. You don't need to make sure you carry something 3 levels forward, which is also something I love, because normally when I play games like this, I never use my BFG for fear that there's a slightly bigger enemy crab around the corner. I didn't have that problem in this game. I always felt like I could use what was available to me. I never felt worried that I would screw myself over later. Now, one of the big mechanics of this game, as you guys can probably tell from this footage, is the slow-mo mechanic. Yes, the slow-mo mechanic, that beautiful mechanic that every game tried to imitate after Max Payne. It's actually implemented really well here. I'm shocked at how well it's implemented. It's something that you're going to be using probably quite frequently in this game, but it allows the enemies to actually feel like super soldiers for once, so that you need to activate slow-mo just to survive. The enemies are really aggressive. They will hit very hard. They don't miss often, so you need to use everything available to you. And the slow-mo really helps out in this, and it makes everything look very cool. You see bullets whizzing through the air, and thanks to the crazy physics engine in this game, you'll shoot walls and dust clouds will fly up, obscuring everyone's vision. Or you'll shoot a stack of papers and papers will be flying in the air during this firefight. During some of the intense ones, it really gets crazy, especially the dust effects. They might have went a little overboard on that, because sometimes there's so much dust, you can't see anything. In the end, I really only have 2 complaints with slow-mo. And that is, 1, throughout the levels to encourage exploration, they will throw permanent max health ups and permanent slow-mo time ups to you throughout the game. At first, the slow-mo ups you can barely even tell that the bar increased, but by the end of the game, it gets so long that you can stay in slow-mo for so long that it really I feel like it lasts longer than it should. And it also recharges probably a bit faster than it should. The one thing, I like that they tie the slow-mo in with the character itself a little bit. The reason Point Man is such a badass is because he has superhuman reflexes, and that's what the slow motion is. I'll give it to him. The gameplay is very fun. It's split up in between kind of the hallucination horror sections. They break up the action occasionally. For the most part, a lot of it is shooting enemies, and the AI in this game actually really impressed me. For 2005, some of this AI is probably better than some of the stuff I see nowadays. The enemies are constantly talking to each other. It's my favorite kind of radio chatter where it's like, "Go recon! He's killing all of us!" Ah! It makes the super soldiers feel a little bit more human, I think. And they'll also take cover. They'll dive through windows. They will be aggressive in a way that isn't aggressively stupid that I see a lot of first-person shooter AIs be nowadays. And since you don't have regenerating health in this game, you actually have to pay attention. Another thing I really like, this is a great system of you can carry up to 10 med kits. You can pop them whenever you want, which is a little bit crazy because a guy can be shooting you point blank and you can just be soaking tons of damage and you could just be mashing your med kit button and be just fine because there's no animation for it. I really like that over the wait behind cover mechanic so many games implement nowadays, and I think it adds a lot to the tension of this game. Overall, the first F.E.A.R game, I think I almost look at it kind of like a Half-Life 1 or a Half-Life 2. It's a game that you almost have to put yourself back in the mindset of this is 2005, and then you'll be like, holy crap, this game's amazing. And I think it's still fun today. I don't think this game is dated. I just think, some of its technological feats may not be as impressive nowadays. Speaking of the technological feats, let's get into that. The lighting engine in this game looks amazing. This lighting, in my mind, rivals some of the lighting I see that comes out today. When some of the psychological horror stuff starts going on and the lights that are hanging from a rope start swinging from the ceiling, and you'll see light and shadows actually be created really well from that effect. But even your flashlight provides it's done really well, even though it is probably simultaneously the shortest lasting flashlight and also the fastest recharging flashlight. Now, the physics in this game are very 2005 physics, where everyone thought the future of game physics was to have magnificent ragdolls when people die. So when enemies die, they'll just like, they'll like flop everywhere. The physics are really good in this game, except sometimes they get a little bit hyperactive. I'm looking at you every time I accidentally kicked a pop can. I hear this tin can sound effect as the pop can like bounces around the room and just won't stop.
You have one new message. First message from Ian Hives. Norton, it's Ian Hives.
The sound design is done very, very well. All of the sound effects are magnificently creepy. The guns sound right. Everything, especially the radio chatter for the enemies, sounds very cool. Absolutely love it. And I think a lot of the music when you're fighting enemies fits the game really well. A lot of it isn't high action, high tempo, heart pumping stuff. Some of it is just kind of like eerie, you're fighting super soldiers that are like really weird music, or like weird stuff's going on, so you don't need a high action pumping soundtrack. I like that they didn't go with that so many first person shooters do. This is a game I really think that people should give a try if they are first person shooter fans. I had a very good time playing this first game. And now let's get into the expansion packs. The first of which is Extraction Point. This game takes place, and no spoilers here, it takes place immediately after the end of the first F.E.A.R. It is a direct sequel, so to speak, with the main goal being exactly in the title. It is just you trying to get to the extraction point. Now, first thing to note about these expansion packs is while the first base game was made by Monolith Studios, I'm not entirely sure what happened here, but somewhere along the way, they lost the rights to the F.E.A.R. franchise, and instead another developer took up the reins here called Timegate. I looked up, and Timegate hasn't done a ton of games, and they're actually shut down now. They were the developers of this expansion pack. Now, this first expansion pack just added a single player. From what I understand, there is no new features to the multiplayer, and I forgot to mention there is multiplayer, but I don't think it works anymore because it used the GameSpy servers, and that went down a while back. There may be fan mods that would correct that for you guys. I didn't look that deep into it. If someone knows, please correct me. Anyway, Extraction Point just added a new single-player campaign to go through. You know, expansion pack stuff. Like I said, it takes place right after the main game. Nothing really happens in this story. It's just you trying to get the extraction point. Some interesting things happen in maybe the first 20 minutes. Then they do some things that apparently they thought I would care about, but I really don't. Then you get to the extraction point. It really felt like a level pack at best. This did not feel like an expansion pack to me. Expansion packs mean one of two things to me. It means you either meaningfully continued the story, or you added enough new things or elements to make the game feel completely different. This did neither of those. You have a few new weapons, a few new enemy types. Supposedly this game boasted improved AI. I did not see improved AI. I might have seen worse AI. Since I'm talking about Extraction Point, it's time to get into a few of the little technical issues with the F.E.A.R. games. Now, this is one that plagues all the base F.E.A.R. game and both expansions from my knowledge. Apparently, some newer keyboards and mice, a lot of people like to say Logitech ones, but I have both a new mechanical Logitech keyboard and a new Logitech mouse. That's not what set this issue off, but basically, about 5 or 10 minutes after starting up the game, if you're getting like 10 frames a second and it just happens spontaneously and doesn't stop until you restart the game, there's this weird issue where the polling rates on these devices will just cause that. For me, it was the Steam controller receiver that was plugged in, which was really strange. So I had to unplug my USB dongle for the Steam controller every time I wanted to play. Frustrating. Other than that, I had a few crashes here and there with the base F.E.A.R. game, trying to switch some video options, switching resolutions, things like that. Nothing too bad. Extraction Point? Oh, Extraction Point. Where do I begin? First of all, you guys probably noticed the resolution difference. I could not, anytime I tried to change it to a higher resolution, the game crashed. Oftentimes, if I tried to change any video options, the game would crash. I encountered a really awful bug around interval 5. They call the levels intervals. Or maybe it wasn't 5. It was one of them. And basically, I loaded in. I started doing combat. The game locked up. That's frustrating. Do it again. Game locked up at the exact same spot. That's strange. I did that about 5 more times. I tried messing with video options. Nothing worked there. I looked online. I think this is a really obscure bug where basically if you get it, you have to have a save prior to this level loading in because it's just going to afflict you forever. So I had no choice. I wasn't going to play through this expansion pack again from the start, so I had to level skip that entire thing. That gets some points stocked for me. Extraction Point as a whole was just really not a very pleasant experience for me. It added very little and amounted to more of a level pack in my mind. The funny thing about these expansion packs is if you buy F.E.A.R nowadays, you're probably going to get them for free. So it's less of an issue of, are these worth the money, and more of a, are they worth my time? An Extraction Point, unless you're really just craving more of the combat and combat alone, because while they have the horror paranormal stuff going on, none of it even comes close to as being as good as the original F.E.A.R game, and it's paced very poorly in my mind. If you just want more F.E.A.R combat, if you want something that amounts to kind of like a level pack, then you might get some enjoyment out of Extraction Point. But otherwise, I'll just say skip it. I really didn't think it was that great of an experience. Well, with that, I went into Perseus Mandate with some pretty low expectations. Once again, developed by Timegate Studios. Now, the plot of this game actually has nothing to do with Point Man. It's almost like they're going the Half-Life 1 expansion pack route of making a sort of continuation of like a related character or like the same character, Point Man. And then this one just you take the role of a completely different character. You're not Point Man anymore. I guess we'll call him the Sergeant, because that's what everyone says. You have another cast of 2 supporting characters that are even blander than the first. Oh, but wait, I'm sorry. They're better this time because they try and humanize one of them to say he has a wife and kid and he can't wait to go back home and see him. There's a few things that just don't make sense about this seemingly random character switch to the Sergeant. First of all, it completely breaks my immersion when the Sergeant has the exact same superhuman abilities of slow-mo as Point Man, which was supposed to be Point Man's thing. Second of all, apparently they went to the same karate school because all of the melee attacks are exactly the same. Oh, by the way, there's melee attacks that instantly kill foes, and they are amazingly ridiculous. You can do like a flying jump kick, a slide, and just like a rifle butt if you're really lame. So for all intents and purposes, you are Point Man. You're just not. The plot actually follows parallel to the base original F.E.A.R game in that you see the repercussions of all the actions you did in the first F.E.A.R game, but you're taking part in a different squad that's doing things, simultaneously while Point Man was doing his thing. It actually works much better than Extraction Point. I'm not going to call it good, but it's far more interesting because things are happening, and you actually get another look at these things that were talked about in the first base F.E.A.R game, and you get to go there and experience and see what these structures and what was going on at this other place. So the story's a little bit better. I think the new weapon additions are a little bit better. They don't feel nearly as lazy to me. For example, Extraction Point added a laser rifle weapon that has the blandest looking weapon model I've ever seen. Apparently these guys were a big fan of GoldenEye because there's no reload animation other than your gun just going down for a second and coming back up. It gets a little bit better in Perseus Mandate. I think some of the new weapons are a little bit cooler, like this little Tesla cannon thing. And the new enemies that have been added are probably the lamest yet. There's a little demon thing that hides in the floor, and if you step into the incredibly obvious and sound-cued areas that they are at, they will drag you under, at which point you shotgun blast them once before they attack, and they don't really do anything. Probably one of the lamest enemies I've ever seen. Perseus Mandate probably has the weakest psychological horror bits in my mind yet. And it could just be that you become completely desensitized to them by this point. When I see a room just like covered in blood and I'm walking on blood and there's bodies everywhere, it doesn't do anything for me by this point because the past 2, games have already done that to death, and it just loses some of its impact. It's also a little bit more jump scary in this game, kind of like they were running out of ideas. Overall, Perseus Mandate, I feel, was a more worthy expansion to the base game than Extraction Point. The plot is a little bit better in my mind, even though it really makes no sense, and it even gets pointed out by one of the characters who says, yeah, you know, you're not Point Man. You kind of remind me of Point Man, but what are you doing here? Like, what's your motivation? You don't have any reason to be here. The game even points it out, and it's what I was thinking the entire time, like, who is Sergeant and why does he care? But if you were going to play one of the two expansions, I'd pick Perseus Mandate personally, because I think it has a little bit more interesting plot and better combat and just about better everything compared to Extraction Point. Funnily enough, after doing some research after beating these games, Perseus Mandate was the one that was critically panned really hard, and Extraction Point was received decently well. I don't get it. Extraction Point, to me, was just kind of a mess of randomness. But another big part of that, too, could be that Perseus Mandate came out in 2007. First of all, they were cashing in on this game series pretty hard because the first game came out in 2005, and they were starting to do yearly releases. That's a little bit much. Second, by 2007, this game probably wasn't looking nearly as impressive as it originally was, with games like Halo 3 and BioShock coming out. Now, the funny thing you might be thinking is, but Minotaur, if I don't play the expansions, how can I play through the entire game series? You said that Extraction Point took place exactly right after the first game, so I won't know what's happening in F.E.A.R 2 if I don't play it. Well, that's the funny thing. I haven't played F.E.A.R 2 yet, but everything I've read online basically says, after Perseus Mandate, Monolith got their rights back to the game. At which point, they retconned both expansion packs so they're not canon. If you want to enjoy the entire story of the F.E.A.R universe, you don't need to play them. They don't exist. As they stand, in my mind, they are level packs and nothing more. If you want more of the combat, you can do it. If you truly really loved the first game, give these a play. It'll satisfy you a little bit more. But it's really not, neither of them are nearly as good as the base game in my mind. With that said, the base game is absolutely worth playing if you like first-person shooters or even if you like atmospheric games. It's a joy to play, and the slow motion works really well and lets you do cool things like throw a grenade and then shoot it in midair to have it explode, and it looks glorious. You can pick this game up for 360, PS3, PC, which is what I would recommend because this game's kind of twitchy. I can't imagine playing it on a console. Yeah, it's just a really good time. You can pick it up on Steam or GOG, whatever. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this review / thoughts. Very interesting game to play through, and you know what? Maybe I'll probably play through the second one at some point too, and maybe do a review / thoughts on that. So, till next time, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Later, everyone.